If you're looking for an easy way to empower your devs to quickly get started with Azure or to quickly throw up a dev or demo environment and then just as quickly tear it down again, then you just might be looking for Azure Deployment Environments. With Azure Deployment Environments, you also gain a fair bit of control over these types of environments. And I don't mean like you will be controlling them, just that you will be aware of their existence, the costs they generate. You can define their basic setup, define permissions, and so on, without having to give each and every dev their own Azure subscription. It also does an excellent job of providing good self-service to your devs without you having to do too much. You define the templates that will be available, delegate access, and then just sit back and relax while the devs get to do their job. It is a win-win. But I'm guessing this all sounds too good. So in this video, I'll be going into a bit more detail on just how Azure Deployment Environments work, what you can do with it. I'll do some demos, and then I'll show you a really cool thing about it, how you can integrate it with the usage of Microsoft DevBox. Cool? Let's dig in. So I first stumbled upon Azure Deployment Environments through Microsoft DevBox, which isn't that weird, considering that the two share a lot of the same components and in many ways are complementary to each other. If you want to know more about DevBox, I have several videos on it, and if I don't forget about this, then there will be a link up in the corner and in the description as well. The reason I bring up DevBox is not just because I have videos on it, although views, of course, are always appreciated, but it's because a lot of the concepts there also apply to Azure Deployment Environments as well. Stuff like enabling the separation of duties and stuff like that. Enabling self-service, not only to the end user or dev in this case, but also to project leads, team leads, and so on. I'll probably not go too deep on that stuff here in the interest of time, so feel free to check those videos out as well if you want to know more about those kinds of things. Okay, so first let's quickly cover some of the components that you will need to be familiar with when it comes to Azure Deployment Environments. At the top level of the setup, you will have a dev center, which pretty much just acts as a container for all the other stuff you need for Azure Deployment Environments to work. It also allows you to do to set some top level settings that will apply to everything else in your deployment. In the dev center, you can have 0 or more catalogs. Yes, 0 or more. Sound weird? I'll tell you how that works in a bit. Catalogs are basically just collections of infrastructure as code templates. You point to a repository in either Azure DevOps or GitHub, select the branch and the folder, and then any subfolder within there that contains the proper files. They will be imported as catalogs to your dev center. Any future additions as well, since this is automatically synced every 30 minutes or so. You can also choose to add a quick start catalog provided by Microsoft, which is kind of neat. It may not fit your needs perfectly, but it's a great starting point. Anyway, in a dev center, you can also have 1 or more projects. And if you refer to the documentation, projects represent a team or business function within the organization. Based on that and the name project, you pretty much get the picture of what projects are. One thing you actually need to have in both your dev centers and your projects are environment types. And at the dev center level, these don't really look like they do too much. You define a name, tags, and that's it. But at project level, they really come into play. At project level, you add environment types by selecting one of the types defined at the dev center level, and then you get to select which subscription the resources your devs spin up will be placed in, what identity that will be used to do the deployments, what kind of permissions they will get to their deployments, and any additional tags, in addition to those tags that you are defined at the dev center level. The final key thing here is environments, and these are what your devs will be setting up through Azure Deployment Environments. The Azure resources that they end up with based on the catalogs you make available to them. Or if you want separation of duties and delegation of stuff, based on the catalogs that the admin of the project makes available to them. So, to sum up, you have dev centers, catalogs, environment types, and then finally environments. And it doesn't need to be in that order. Like I mentioned, you can have 0 or more catalogs in a dev center, But you need to have catalogs in order for any of this to actually work. The thing is that catalogs you add at dev center level will be available to all projects within it. So if you want more granularity or delegation, you can instead add catalogs to projects, or you can do both if you want to. But enough of me yapping. Let's head on over to the Azure portal and I'll show you how to set this up, how these things are connected to each other, and how a working setup will look, both from an admin's perspective and from a dev's perspective. So when we go into the Azure portal, you can either choose to go to DevBox or you can go to Azure Deployment Environments. There's not really a whole lot of difference. If we go here over to Azure Deployment Environments, you have the option to configure dev centers or projects. However, if we were to go to DevBox, we have the option to configure dev centers or projects. But you also have a couple other things that are unique to DevBox and not to Azure Deployment Environments. But since it really doesn't matter all that much, let's stick here and stay here in the DevBox section for now. So first thing you need to create, like I mentioned, at the top level you have dev centers. So I have one here, but let us go through the process of creating one. So you'll see how that works. So I'll hit new. I'll select which subscription resource group. In this case, I'll do a new one. Just call this the ADA demo. Give it a name. I guess demo dev center 02 is perfect. Select a location, and here you have the option to attach a quick start catalog, either for Azure Deployment Environments or for DevBox customization tasks. I would recommend you leave these enabled just because it provides a good starting point for both you for learning how this stuff all works, and for your devs in order to get started with Azure Deployment Environments. So I'll head on to next, and here you basically have two sections. You have catalogs and you have Microsoft DevBox. The DevBox stuff does not matter at all for us at this point because we're not deploying DevBox, we're deploying Azure Deployment Environments. But it also doesn't matter if they are selected here. The enable catalogs for project settings that is applicable to Azure Deployment Environments. That's what I mentioned, that you can have catalogs in your dev center and then have it inherited down to all the projects, or you can have catalogs per project. So if you deselect this one, then your project admins, team admins, or whoever you delegate the administration of projects to, they will be unable to add their own catalogs and can only make available the same catalogs that you have made available through your dev center. But I like to leave this on because it's a good thing to give the option to the project admins or team admins if they wanted to. So I'll hit review and create because I'm skipping tags in this demo. Grab a cup of coffee and see you in a bit. With that done, I can head on over and go to my resource and check out my shiny new dev center. And the first thing I wanted to cover here is the catalogs part, because in our deployment we selected that we wanted to attach the quick start projects or quick start catalog, and this is listed here. And if I click on it, I can see the catalog items that are within that catalog item. So when my devs will be signing in and trying to deploy stuff, this is what they would have the option to choose from. So I have a web app, app config, sandbox, and so on. What is also kind of neat is that you have the URL for the GitHub repo here. So I can simply copy this and open up a new tab and go to that page, and I can take a look at the code that is supplied to us in this quick start catalog. And if I head on over to environment definitions here, you can see that we have ARM templates and we have bicep templates. And those are your options when it comes to the languages they use to create the catalogs. So they have to be either based on ARM or they have to be based on Bicep. Sadly, Terraform is not available as of yet. But if we enter into the ARM templates here, you can see that we have the web app that we saw earlier, and we have the sandbox. If we go into the Bicep templates, you see that we have the same kind of structure, README file and folders for each of our catalog items. So that's the quick start template. But I do have some examples on my own GitHub page. I have a repo that has a catalog stuff. So let me show you how you would go ahead and add your own repository as catalogs. So I'll hit add here and I'll give it a fancy name. And then you have the option of selecting either Azure DevOps or GitHub. That's the only two places where your catalogs can be stored as of now. If I were to select GitHub, you see that you have the option of using the GitHub app as authentication or the personal access token. If you select the personal access token, you also need to have that token stored in a key vault that you then point to down here. In my case, I'll use the GitHub app because I've used that in the past. The first time you set this up, you need to give the Microsoft Dev Center app access to either all of your repos or specific repos. In my case, I have given it access to just a single repo, which is my demo stuff repo. Again, link is in the description. And then you select the branch and the folder where your catalog items are stored. So in my case, they are stored in the DevBox stuff folder because I've been using these to demo stuff around DevBox as well. And then you have the option of either automatically syncing or not. I would suggest you keep automatically sync enabled because then any future catalogs you add to your repo will be automatically added as catalogs as well. Then I'll hit add. And the cool thing is, again, you have the URL for the GitHub repo here. So I can copy that, open up a new tab, and we can take a look at it. So like I said, it's stored in the DevBox stuff folder in my case. And I have the basic lab, DevBox lab, and a VM lab. If I take a look at the basic lab here, you can see that this is based on Bicep. You can also see that I have this environment.yaml file, which is required for this to be imported as a catalog. If I take a look at that, you see that we have the name, summary, description, template path, in my case, main.bicep. And then you have these parameters. So if you, in your Bicep files, require some input, you add these as parameters here, and then you can have your devs select or input the values when they deploy stuff from the Azure Deployment Environments portal, which we'll get back to in a bit. But this is a fairly simple template. It requires the one parameter as an input. If we take a look at the DevBox lab, for example, this is a bit bigger and has some more inputs required. So you can make these as complicated as you choose. So that's my stuff that should be added as a catalog now. So we'll head on back, and the next stage would be to set up a project. So I'll under manage, I'll select projects and I'll hit create. And we select the dev center that this project will be deployed or connected to. In my case, I'll use the dev or demo dev center. Give it a fancy name, demo projects. Description is not required, so I'll skip that for now. The DevBox management stuff is not applicable to us right now, so we'll just skip that and go on to catalogs. And here you have the option of selecting what kind of stuff from your dev center will be applied to the project as well. So in our case, we'll leave these as default, and then I'll hit review and create. Once that is done, let us go into our resource And what we can do is take a look at under settings. We have the catalogs, and there are none, which, you know, fair or not, all of the catalogs that I have in my containing or parent dev center will be applied to this as well. And we're getting close to a working setup now, but let us get back to our dev center, because there are a couple of things we need to do there as well. I mentioned that we need to have environment types. So I'll go into environment types here, and I'll hit create environment type. And like I mentioned, this is super simple. You have the name and you have some tags. So I'll call it type 01. And tags, don't really care about that now. Then I'll hit add. So, and then I'll go back to my project. Then under environment configuration, I have environment types. And now that we created one in the parent dev center, we can go ahead and add environment type. And under type here, we select our type 01. And then we can select the deployment subscription, which is basically where the resources will be deployed to. You also have the option of using a system assigned managed identity for the deployment, or if you remove this, you can add a user assigned managed identity as well if you prefer to do it that way. I'll use the system assigned at this point, and then you have the permissions that will be given on the resources created. And the thing is, when a dev deploys stuff from the Azure Deployment Environments, they will have their own resource group. All the stuff will be created within one resource group, and then what role you select here will be the permissions that the dev will then have on that resource group. So select whatever fits your case the best. I'll use contributor for now. And then you can also opt for adding any additional access. This could be, for example, if you want to make sure that your platform team has access to all environments created, you can then add in a enter ID group here and give those the owner role, in addition to what the creator of the environment also gets. And then any additional tags that you want to add in as well. This could be, for example, the project name. And then I'll go ahead and hit add. And then once the environment type is added, you can also, of course, disable or enable it as you see fit if you wanted to. And the final thing we need to do right now is to add some permissions. So I'll get on over to access control. I'll hit add and add role assignment. And there are basically two main roles you need to consider. You have the deployment environments user, and you have the dev center project admin. The deployment environments user allows for users to actually deploy stuff through your Azure Deployment Environment setup, and the dev center project admin delegates access to managing the project as a whole. So they will be able to add catalogs, and they will be able to manage environments and so on. But I'll add myself as a deployment environments user in this case. Select members. See if I can find myself. There we are. Select, review and assign, and review and assign. And now that we have done that, we should have a working setup. Actually, no, because I forgot one very important thing, and that's why I'm back here. We're at our dev center now, and the dev center itself needs to have the proper permissions on your subscription in order to deploy stuff. So before we move along, you should go to your dev center, and under settings, you have the identity. And here you can switch on the system assigned managed identity and then hit yes. And remember, I chose to use the system assigned managed identity. That is why I'm turning on this one instead of managing or adding in a user assigned managed identity. So as soon as we have our system assigned managed identity enabled, we are going to go ahead and assign it the owner permission on the Azure subscription. And now that the system assigned identity is enabled, we can go ahead and click add Azure role assignments. We'll add our role assignment. The scope should be our subscription. We'll select the subscription that we selected as the subscription where all the resources will be deployed. And we'll give it the role of owner because in this case, the dev center needs both contributor to deploy stuff and it needs the user access admin role in order to set permissions on the resource group and the stuff deployed within it. So that's why we are selecting the owner role in this setting here. Then I'll hit save and then we can head on over to the portal, I think. So it's time to switch gears and show you how this looks from a user's perspective or dev perspective. And the devs have two options. They can use devportal.microsoft.com or they can use devbox.microsoft.com. And this is devportal.microsoft.com and this is devbox.microsoft.com. Can you spot the difference? Again, devbox, devportal. They're fairly the same. Why they actually have two different URLs for this, I have no idea. They are the exact same as far as I can tell. They have the same options. The only thing difference is basically the heading up here. DevBox, Developer Portal. Anyway, I have two existing environments here. Those are from a different dev center that I had deployed earlier on, just so you can see how that looks as well. And you can pretty much not spot anything here that is related to the dev center really. So your devs will not have any relationship into what the dev center is. They pretty much only have the projects and the catalogs. That's basically what they need to worry about. But let us try to deploy a new environment here. And you can see that I have two different projects that I can choose from. I have the demo project, which was the one we created earlier. And I have a project 01, which is a previous one that I have made. So I'll give this the name of demo 01. And I'll select our demo project. And you can see that this has only the one type 01, which we created earlier. But if I change to project 01, you can see that I have two different types to select from. So that is how it will look if you have multiple environment types. And after that, we have the definition. And these are basically the catalogs that we imported. And if you can see here, these are all the quick start catalogs that was connected during our creation of our dev center. So I can select, for example, the sandbox here, and I can hit create, and I would get that empty resource group that we talked about earlier, and that would be it. But you can also click the see all definitions, and these are, it's a bit more descriptive. We have the catalog, which they were connected from, our quick start catalog that Microsoft provided us with, and you have a bit more description. And this is, grabbed directly from the environment.yaml that we saw in our in my GitHub repo. And as I said, now that I have selected the sandbox, I can just hit create. But if I instead go with, for example, the container app with Cosmos, then you see it changes to next, which means I have some more input that I need to make. Remember, the YAML file had a parameter that I needed to input. That is what would be hidden behind this next. But before we go and hit that next button, you also see that we have the enable schedule deletion here, which is kind of nice because you can then select a date and time where these environments will be automatically deleted. So you don't have to worry about having stale environments just sitting there accumulating costs. But I'll leave that off, and then I'll hit next, and then you can see that in the case of this catalog, I need to select a repository URL, which is basically the code that will be running in this container app, and a runtime type. Again, this is defined in the environment.yaml file that is provided together with the IIC template. Then I'll just hit create, and then the Azure Deployment Environments will begin deploying this in the background. But while that is deploying, let's see what our options are with any existing ones. So for the two that I have already deployed here, you can click these ellipses, and then you have the option of redeploying, changing expiration, deployment logs, and so on. And this deployment logs here is quite neat. If you, for some reason, have deployments that are failing, you can go in here and download all of the deployment logs as well, if you need to, troubleshoot further on. So that's kind of neat. And you also have the option to delete these as a user. I can also hit the environment resources link here, and that will take me to the Azure portal, where I can manage the resource group that I was given and the resources deployed through that catalog item. So if you, for example, you select the sandbox catalog item, this would be an empty resource group, and your dev could do whatever they wanted from there on. If they wanted to use ClickOps to deploy stuff, they could, or they could fire up the command line and do deployments from PowerShell or Azure CLI or something like that. That's entirely up to them as well. So this is what a dev or user of your Azure Deployment Environments will see, and how they can interact with the service from there. But as a project admin, you can also go ahead and manage all of the resources that are deployed within your project. So if I go into my project 01 here, and then I hit manage, and then I have the environments down here. These are the previous ones that I deployed earlier. You can see the names, their provisioning state, and the resource group that these are deployed to, which is a link, so I can click that and I can see all of the resources deployed in it. I can also see whether or not they have an expiration date. You see one of these will expire in 3 weeks. That means that in 3 weeks, this will be automatically deleted. You can also view the costs, which is kind of neat. Like I mentioned, you do have some control over and insight into the costs accumulated. And of course, you have some management tools, for example, changing the expiration. So if your devs never set any expiration dates on their environments, you have the option to go ahead and add that here yourself. So now that you know a whole lot more about Azure Deployment Environments, and you've seen it in action, it's time to talk a bit about DevBox. Like I mentioned, I have videos on it, but if you've never even heard about it before, DevBox is a service built upon Windows 365 that allows for the creation of personal VMs, or dev boxes in this case, through self-service running in Azure that users can securely connect to over the internet. And why do I mention DevBox in conjunction with Azure Deployment Environments? Well, two things. First one, with Azure Deployment Environments, your devs can create their own isolated dev environments, but they will often need a way to connect to those environments in order to test stuff or locally connect to stuff in those environments. And since dev boxes connect outbound to the Windows 365 control plane, they are pretty much hassle-free in terms of connectivity. Second of all, a dev box dedicated to each environment means that you can customize the dev box to that specific environment and build them with the tools needed for that exact environment. And also, it's helpful to keep things separated. And integrating DevBox with Azure Deployment Environments isn't all that hard when you think about it, because all of the environments are based on catalogs, right? And they, in turn, are based on IAC templates you provide, right? So basically, it's really just a matter of also deploying a dev center, a project, and so on in that template. It gets kind of Inception style, but I have a template that does just that in the repo that I showed earlier. And from a dev's perspective, they can basically just hop on over in the portal here, and after they've created their environment, they can go up here and hit new dev box. They can fill out some information here and then hit just create. And then about half an hour later, they will have a dev box that they can connect to. So integrating DevBox in Azure Deployment Environments does make the whole thing kind of a two-stage thing, but in my opinion, it's worth it. You could also, of course, do regular VMs, Bastion, and a couple of other things, but in my experience, DevBox makes for the most user-friendly approach by far. If you found value in this video, I would really appreciate you help me out by engaging, sharing, and so on. One other video you might find useful is this one here, where I set up DevBox in less than 9 minutes. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.